The desire to save or awaken the world often comes from a subtle form of ego. The belief that we see something others cannot, that we have risen above and must now lift everyone else to our level. It feels noble, even compassionate. But hidden within it is a quiet arrogance. Life does not need rescuing. It has been dancing its intricate rhythm long before we arrived, and it will continue long after we're gone. The idea that humanity is lost and must be fixed is itself a misunderstanding of how existence works. The world is not an error. It is a flowing process, perfectly expressing itself in each moment. When you look closely, you see that every person, every situation, even the chaos and confusion, is part of a larger unfolding. Just as the ocean doesn't try to control the movement of its waves, the universe does not require our correction. Each being moves according to its own timing, learning and evolving in its own way. Trying to awaken others before their time is like pulling a flower open before it has bloomed. You only damage what was already becoming beautiful. This illusion of saving the world also keeps us trapped in frustration. We start to judge those who don't see. What we see, feeling superior or disheartened when they resist. But awakening cannot be forced. It is like sunlight. It falls where it will, warming everything naturally. The task is not to change others, but to understand the dream we are all sharing. The world is not asleep in error. It is dreaming in purpose. When we recognize that, we stop shouting into the dream and begin to listen to it, realizing that even what we call ignorance is part of life's mysterious harmony. Awakening is not about converting others or persuading them to see through your eyes. It begins quietly, within the landscape of your own mind and heart. The true journey starts when you turn inward and recognize that everything you perceive as out there is, in some mysterious way, a reflection of what is happening inside you. The desire to awaken others often fades when you realize that the only transformation that truly matters is your own. Once you awaken to yourself, your fears, your patterns, your illusions, you begin to see that others are not lost, but simply walking their own paths of discovery. When the inner eyes open, you no longer feel the urge to pull others along. You understand that awareness cannot be given, only realized. The same consciousness that breathes through you is breathing through them, unfolding at its own pace. What once appeared as ignorance or blindness becomes part of a divine process. a natural stage of growth. You begin to respect the timing of life, just as you respect the changing of seasons. There is a deep calm in knowing that everyone's awakening will come exactly when it is meant to, not a moment sooner. As you awaken within yourself, something subtle yet powerful happens. Your presence becomes transformative. Without teaching, without effort, your energy begins to affect others. They sense your peace, your clarity, and your acceptance. You don't need to preach. Your being becomes the message. The stillness within you becomes contagious, and those who are ready will feel drawn to it, not by force, but by resonance. Awakening, then, is not an act of teaching, but of embodying. It spreads not through words, but through the quiet radiance of one who has come home to themselves. There is a curious paradox at the heart of awakening. The harder you try to awaken others, or even yourself, the further you drift from the very state you seek. Effort, by its nature, carries tension, a subtle resistance to what is. When you struggle to make something happen, you imply that what exists now is not enough, that life must be pushed or improved. But awareness does not bloom under pressure. It unfolds in stillness. The truth reveals itself when the mind ceases to grasp, when the heart stops demanding results. Awakening is not an achievement to reach, but a realization of what has always been. The moment you stop trying so hard, the mind begins to relax. It's as though a clenched fist opens, and in that soft openness, clarity dawns naturally. You cannot force the sun to rise by shouting at the horizon. You can only wait in stillness and watch as the light appears on its own. So too with consciousness. It awakens in its own time when the conditions are right. Effort often delays that moment because it creates noise in the mind, a desperate buzzing that drowns out the quiet truth, already whispering beneath. This is why non-effort is not laziness, but wisdom. It is the art of allowing rather than forcing, of trusting rather than controlling. When you stop trying to awaken others, when you stop straining to be awakened yourself, you finally fall into harmony with the natural rhythm of existence. The awakening that comes through surrender is effortless and real because it arises from the flow of life itself, not from the will of the ego. In letting go of the chase, you discover that you were never asleep to begin with, only dreaming you were. The world you experience is not separate from you. It mirrors the quality of your inner state. When your mind is restless, the world appears chaotic. When your heart is heavy, life feels burdensome. But when peace takes root within, the same world begins to shine with calmness and clarity. This is not because the world has changed, but because your perception has. Reality is not something fixed and objective. It bends, reflects, and dances according to the consciousness that observes it. What you see out there is, in truth, a projection of what you carry in here. When you begin to understand this, the impulse to blame or change others weakens. You see that the anger, confusion, and disharmony you notice in the world are invitations to look within. The universe speaks to you through reflections, not demands. Every conflict mirrors an unhealed corner of the heart. Every moment of beauty reflects the openness of your being. The outer world becomes a teacher, constantly showing you what still asks for understanding. The task, then, is not to fix the mirror, but to polish the lens through which you see. As inner awareness deepens, the world begins to transform effortlessly. You respond to people with patience, instead of judgment, with compassion instead of control. Even challenges lose their sting because you see them as part of a larger balance. Life starts to appear as a living mirror, fluid, intelligent, and responsive to your state of consciousness. The more harmony you cultivate within, the more harmony reveals itself around you. What you call the world is the echo of your inner vibration, the reflection of your own awakening playing itself out in infinite forms. To see clearly is to realize that you and the world have never been two. Real transformation never comes from convincing others through argument or persuasion. It arises from the silent power of embodiment. When you live what you understand, when your actions align with your awareness, you become a quiet example of truth in motion. People sense authenticity more deeply than they hear words. A calm presence communicates more effectively than 1,000 explanations. When you are at peace with yourself, others feel that peace, not because you teach it, but because you are it. Your energy speaks in a language that no lecture can translate. The impulse to preach or correct comes from a subtle within, as if your truth needs others' approval to be real. But once you realize that truth stands on its own, you no longer need to prove it. You begin to see that every being is on their own path, learning through their own rhythm of experience. Your task is not to drag them forward, but to walk your path so clearly that others are illuminated by your light without even trying. This is the essence of effortless influence, a radiance that asks for nothing and compels everything. Presence is contagious. When you meet someone who is deeply at ease, something within you begins to relax too. Their stillness invites your own. This is how awakening spreads, not by force, but by resonance. The most powerful teachers are often those who say the least, because their being itself carries the message. To live consciously is to teach without intention. To embody peace is to offer healing without words. When you simply are what you wish the world to become, the world begins, quietly and naturally, to follow.